It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yahoo! Welcoming our special guest, there is Stephen Baird, and this week we're going to talk about the 7 habits of successful media composers. Hello, Steve. How are you, man?
Good. How about you?
Good. Am I still garbly sounding?
You are still garbly sounding. I hope it's not garbly sounding for everybody else, but yes, I'm still hearing garbles.
All right. Well, I think that's just a link between us. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Glad to see you guys here. Steve and I are having a little audio problem, but I don't think that it's getting to you guys. Steve Collins says, Steve, the legend. Wow, you're a legend. You are a true legend.
Nice. Nice. I need that. You need to record that and send it to me. I want to use that.
If we have the highest production values known to the television community. Anyway, I'm really glad he could join us. It's been like probably at least a couple of years since you've been on the show, maybe even longer.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, maybe 3 years.
And
yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, yesterday Stephen and I were testing out the whole, link so that we could see each other. Ended up spending an hour catching up and talking, so it was great, even though we're about, 2,600 miles apart or something like that.
Roughly.
So I want to set the stage a little bit. Years ago, I sent this out in a letter, but not everybody who's going to see this episode is going to see the letter. So I don't know, some years ago, like 12 years ago or more, the Taxi Road Rally, our annual convention, I see this skinny young dude walking around in this like Kermit the Frog green T-shirt, and it says "carries no cash." And we had a room set up. A videographer said, "Hey, why don't you let me videotape some of your members just walking up in front of the camera and going, 'Hey, my name is John Doe, and here's what I'm thinking about the convention or about Taxi, whatever.'" I walk in the room and there's Steve and they're talking, and I'm going, this guy's really bright. There's something likable about him, something, I don't know, I kind of feel like he's going to be successful. I literally knew in that instant. And so he came to the road rally and he figured out what his path was going to be, and he made a few friends and he just hunkered down. And now he's in that club of 6-figure composers who, let's see, he's in 15 to 20 different music libraries. And I think I asked you this yesterday when we were chatting, but I didn't write it down. How many tracks do you have out there, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. It's got to be in the thousands by this point, I would say.
Okay.
It's got to be maybe 1,500, 2,000.
All right.
It's got to be somewhere in that general vicinity, I would say.
That seems to be the magic number. Once people get over 1,000, they're making real money. Once they get over 1,500 usually, and they've been doing it for a few years, they start breaking into that loftier income level.
Yeah.
Is it a fair statement to say that your music is probably on TV somewhere in the world every day, maybe even several hours a day?
Yeah, maybe even right now. Yeah, I would say that's definitely.
Well, let's go watch.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I was moving some stuff around. There was an ad that came up on YouTube, and I was listening to it, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I wrote that music.
Wow.
Like that happens a good little bit, yeah.
Sometimes my wife and I are watching she loves HGTV, all the home decorating shows on HGTV, and every now and then I'll go, oh, I know that cue. That's a Taxi cue. So yeah. It must be even more gratifying for you considering you wrote it and produced it. So anyway, Steve sent me a letter one day, and I was so incredibly moved by this letter that I've literally never forgotten it, and I'm going to read it now because I want to set the stage for this whole conversation, and it relates to one of the 7 habits of highly successful media composers. And it says, "Hey, Michael, I joined Taxi in September of 2007 with nothing more than Reason 2.5 and an old Roland keyboard from the 1980s. Until joining Taxi, I knew nothing about the film and TV or advertising market. Actually, I was quite the newbie. Now, nearly 5 years later, I'm in my second year of making a full-time living writing for TV shows, commercials, promos, and movie trailers. Nearly every penny I've made can be traced back to Taxi, either directly through a forward or indirectly through the people I've met at the Road Rally or on the Taxi Forum. I'm really quite ecstatic with the way things have turned out. Not only am I making as much or more money than most of my friends, but I'm doing so via a career that I've dreamed about since I was a child. If it wasn't for Taxi, I wouldn't have a music career. I can't even imagine what my life would be like right now. So I'd just like to say thank you for offering such a great service to aspiring musicians, composers, artists, and bands. Not just for the opportunities offered through the listings, but for creating such a great environment for musicians to learn and grow. You've definitely changed my life, and for that, I'm forever grateful, Steve. So for that letter, I'm forever grateful because, first of all, yeah, we get nice letters. We get more complaint letters. People, I can't believe you didn't forward that song. You guys wouldn't know a hit if it jumped up and bit you on the butt. But the fact that you acknowledge that Taxi is more than just submitting to the opportunities. It's this whole ecosystem and community and friends and all these resources. And you got that at a pretty early stage. I mean, you were 5 years into it, but still, you got it. So thank you, man. I will always cherish this letter. It's on my wall, my wall of stuff over here, along with, Christmas cards and people that have sent me their first royalty check, stuff like that. So thank you.
No, thank you. No, I was living in essentially, flyover country, I guess you would call it. And I didn't want to do a band, and I didn't know how I could possibly do music from where I was at. So Taxi kind of gave me that, not kind of, definitely. So yeah, my life is way better than I'd ever imagined it because of signing up, taking that leap and signing up.
How long had you been a member when you came to the first rally? Do you remember?
So I had signed up in September, and I couldn't afford to both sign up and go to the rally that first year. So I went the next year that I was a member. So I would say, just over a year, just a little over a year.
And you didn't come with a friend? You didn't know anybody or nothing?
It's just the people I knew from the forums. I just
okay.
Walked in, That was about it, but I never met anybody.
People tell me that they make these friendships, virtual friendships on the forum, and then when they get to the rally, it's kind of like going to a family reunion, even though you've never met face to face. You know, the barriers are down. You already are friends with them, and now it's just a physical thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other good thing, or cool thing about it was, where I was at, it wasn't really writing music for a living. It's not like a thing, you know what I mean? So being able to go there and actually meet and talk with people in person, face to face, in the flesh, that are doing it for a living, really kind of gives you, some jet fuel in your tank to go back and really push at it. So that was another thing that I wasn't really expecting to get from it. But like meeting Matt Hurt, for example, and actually seeing and talking to somebody that was doing it, it's totally different than just seeing somebody online. You actually meet the person, and the people in person. Like, wow, this is a real job. You can actually do this. So that was a big deal.
It's funny that you mentioned Matt Hurt over the weekend. After you and I hung up yesterday, actually, it made me think about Matt Hurt. I haven't spoken to him since he left L.A., I don't think. I think maybe we exchanged one email, but hey, I can have him on the show virtually now,
Yeah, there you go, yeah. Yeah, actually, I talked with him just after he left L.A. Maybe this is like 2 years ago now. But yeah, he seems to be doing well, enjoying the European lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, traipsing through the mountains with his camera, no doubt. I'm always astonished that he can walk through the mountains by himself for a week, and sleep in a pup tent out there in the mountains. I'd be so afraid of a bear, or Charles Manson or whatever.
I mean, for me, I'd be more afraid of being bored to death, to be honest. But I mean, the bear would actually, I would welcome the bear. At least that'd be some excitement, I could run from it, or I don't know what I would do, but Yeah, it would be something. Yeah, I see his little trips. I'm just like, man, that is something. Like, I get it, I appreciate it. It's just, yeah, not, maybe a day. I could do like a day or two. Like that would be kind of cool. And after that, it's like, all right, we gotta hit the bar. This is too much nature for me. I gotta go.
Yeah, I said to my wife and I were in the car coming home from picking up some food for dinner last night, and I said, we saw an RV on the 101. I said, I think I want to get an RV. Let's do like a 10-day road trip of the western states so I can see all those parks that you've seen that I've never seen. Let's get an RV. How does that sound? And she goes, with you? Apparently she thinks I wouldn't be that much fun trapped in a tin can for 10 days with her. Anyway, all right, so let's get to, the first habit of successful people, that letter actually made me think of it, which is showing gratitude, remembering the people that you met on the way up, because you could meet them on the way down, or they could be a great networking system. But the fact that you, at your very young age, I mean, you're not that old now, and back then I know approximately how old you were, but you had your act well together to send that letter. I know it's heartfelt. You didn't do it, like, I'm going to butter him up with this letter. You can just...
Oh, yeah, no.
you can feel how heartfelt it was coming off the page. But the fact that you sent it, most people would think about it and not do it. So hats off to you for having your act together, and getting the first of 7 habits correct. Let's talk about, what do you have for habit number 2?
Let's see here. I think I took some notes. Oh, should we go into, yeah, I guess it's somewhat related, confidence and humility. I guess really, you like, so actually this was at a rally, and I hope I'm not calling this person out too much, but I remember it was one of the one-on-one mentor session things, right? And the guy sits down and he immediately says, okay, so I don't, this is the one where, you're listening to the music and all that. And he's like, okay, I don't need any advice on the music. Like, that's good. I'm good there. What I need is for you to tell me how to, get a place or whatever it was. And I just remember sitting there thinking, like, are you sure about that? If that's the case, why am I sitting on this side and you're sitting on that side, And
wow.
The thing is you should all, like, if I was, as well as I've done, if I was on the other side of the table from, somebody that had a lot of album cuts, because I really want to do, more album cuts and have, tracks that are, plays with artists, all over the world, whether it's here or, overseas or whatever. If I was across from somebody that had a lot of album cuts, like, I would be all ears. I'd be like, what do you think? Listen to the music. What do you think? Where am I going wrong here? Where am I going right? Because you can always learn. So I think you always need to don't ever think that you should have confidence in your ability. So don't think that your music sucks and but you should always be trying to make it better. Like always be like, okay, this is good, but how can I make it better? Even if it's like little things, like how can I make the engineer, how can I be a better engineer? How can I make the drum sound a little bit better here? How can I improve my melodies? How can I, structure the song in a better way? You should always, I think, be looking for that. Even if you're overall happy with the track, you should think, how could it be a little bit better? Now, at some point, you've kind of got to draw the line and be like, okay, this is, it's got to get out there and do whatever. But I think that should always be in your mind. And that whenever I was first starting out, I was actually never really thinking, okay, how is this going to make money at in this kind of show, or how should I do it for this? And I was never thinking like money. I was more thinking along the lines of I want to write the best track that I can write right now. Mm-hmm. And every track that I would do, it would be like, okay, I want to make the best track. I can make this a little bit better than the last one, a little bit better than the last one, and so on and so forth. So I think never really think that you know it all, but also don't think that you don't know anything either. Have confidence in your abilities, be realistic, and really kind of try to make yourself better. I mean, I think I would say probably all the really good songwriters are probably like that. You know, the really good guitar players. I think they're always trying to learn, because once you stop trying to learn.
Yeah, I think that's true of any endeavor, especially creative ones. But in business and sports, always, even Tiger Woods is always trying to refine his game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm letting everybody know that we've got some questions that came in before the show. And also we will take questions after we go through this list. So hang on to your questions. Write them down so you don't forget them. Okay, let's see. Okay, so your third habit was professionalism. Let's talk about that.
Professionalism. Okay, so I think that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. The obvious is, doing things on time and on task.
Yeah.
As much as you can. Obviously there's going to be, things that happen, but for the most part, you should, be on time, on task. But also, I think, I know you talk about this, it attacks a lot of people do, is don't be too attached to your music. Like if you get an edit in, don't, take that personally. Don't be like, whoa, just do it. You're like, okay, and just assume that they have their reasons. And even if you like, because there's times that I've gotten edits. Usually, most edits actually, I do them, and it ends up making the track better. But there's been times when I disagree with an edit, but I don't freak out about it. It's just like I do it, turn it in, and that's that. Kind of treat it like a business in that way. You don't. Think about it. I think a lot of people think because it's a creative industry that they kind of have carte blanche to do kind of whatever. Like the rules don't apply to them. It's like, well, like imagine running a restaurant. You have a customer, that complains about something, and you're like, well, yeah, well, you're stupid. I don't want you eating my food anyways. I guess maybe if you're really good, that could work for a little while, but I just that's not the approach I would take. So I definitely wouldn't take that approach with music.
That would probably be a French restaurant.
Yeah.
Sorry to all of my French viewers. France has a reputation for being a little, very confident about their cooking. They should be.
Yes. Yeah.
French food is awesome.
No, I agree. I love French food. French wine too. It's my favorite.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that yesterday. Professionalism, looking at it from the side of the purveyors of music, the production music libraries, music licensing companies, they've got a couple 100,000 people at any point in time that would love to have a relationship with them and have their music in their catalog. So not only are they going to gravitate to the people that can produce the best music, the most usable music. There is a difference. Not that usable means that it's inferior somehow, but they're also going to gravitate to people who the word professionalism means that they're easy to work with, that they're reliable, that they're enjoyable to work with. All that stuff. So can you think of any examples where, like libraries that you've built a relationship with, where they might reach out to you for something special that they need in a hurry because they know that you'll treat it with a good attitude and you'll probably pull their butt out of the fire by delivering something, staying up all night if you have to deliver something? Does that stuff happen?
Yeah, I think so. I can't, they don't say something like that specifically, but
right.
I think the fact that, I've had multiple situations like that where there was, something maybe maybe they're working on something because a lot of library owners, they're musicians themselves, so it's not like they don't know how to write music or play guitar, piano, or whatever. So they'll work on music too for their clients, and so there could be times where maybe they're working on a theme song or something, and they want. The client wants something in the theme song that maybe is not really their thing, and they've come to me to have them have just kind of like add a few elements here and there that kind of gives them what they're looking for. So like that kind of thing has definitely happened. And I've had, stuff like, hey, can you get this to me tomorrow? Yes. Okay. So I've definitely had stuff like that. Like I said, they've never really said that specifically,
Right.
But just judging by some of the projects and things that have come my way, I'm guessing that is kind of what they're thinking. Like, okay, he can, he's easy to work with. He's on time, on task. He's not going to, freak out about anything if we don't like it or whatever.
People often ask me about mastering and about levels, and I know this seems like it's off topic, but the truth be told is part of professionalism is giving them the deliverables in a way that they can use them, makes their life easier, which is a big part of the game, is making their life easier. So what do you personally do? Do you master every track that you create, or do you let the libraries do it, or do the libraries say, could you master this, or let me master it? And talk to us about levels, because I'm sure that you've got that down to some sort of science by this point. So mastering first, then general deliverable levels for deliverables.
Okay, so you got really garbly on there. So I'm going to let me maybe make sure that I got what the question is. So you're asking about essentially, I think you're asking about mastering, like whether I master for the libraries or not, and then what do I look at as far as levels whenever I'm mastering. Okay, so most libraries I do go ahead and master for them, because a lot of them I don't think they send them to a mastering house. So I try to, and when as far as levels, I'm not looking at a specific like negative 0.03 dB. I mean, I guess I do kind of I do give a little bit of room on the limiter, which is, I believe, negative 0.03 dB on the limiter, but I don't, I'm essentially trying to make it sound as good as I can in the amount of time that I have. Like, I'm not going to be able to get it as good as, like, say I would like if it was like say an artist release. I'd probably spend more time on it, but I get it pretty close. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I want it to sound full and loud and just as good as possible. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. There are some libraries that do the mastering themselves. A lot of the bigger libraries, for example, will send it out to another mastering house, and so they usually will have specific levels that they want, and so they'll tell me what that is, and then I'll bounce it out for. Now, when I submit it, I have it mastered and I send it in hot, sounding good, because I think there is a psychological thing with people, whether you're, a musician or not, or in the industry or not, where something that's louder is going to sound better, or something that just sounds more polished, louder, fuller, however you want to describe it. I think that if it sounds more like a finished product, they're going to think the song itself or the instrumental, whatever, is better, versus if you were to send it kind of like low levels and kind of flat and not, a polished product. And it will maybe make them think like, there's something not quite right with this track. Like they might even think it's like a composition thing and send it back for edits, when in reality, if you would have just sent it sounding like, boom, hot, polished, nice and good, then they'll be like, oh, okay, that sounds great. So when I submit it sounding good, sounding like with the fully mixed, mastered, and then for the finals, I will then do whatever it is that they're asking me to do as far as levels go, so that they can send it to their guy to have it mastered. Then the ones that don't do that, I send it in mastered. Because I want it to sound as good as possible. I think that is a selling point, having it sound good, whether it's for demo purposes or for the final product we're going to be releasing.
I just want to clarify for the audience, because Cass McKenty said editors will set the level. Well, of course they do, but when the library puts it in with, 10,000 other tracks, or even like 14 tracks of the same genre, and the editor is listening through, if you get to number 7 and it's considerably lower in volume, it's a turnoff.
The whole thing sounds like it's not as good, even though it could be the best song of the 14. But if the volumes are low, you know, a lot of, and not everybody, you know, not everybody's that way, but I think in general, you know, like the 80-20 rule, most people are going to look down on that track. And, you know, when the editors are going through this stuff for music supervisors or whatever, they don't have the volume turned all the way down like it's going to be on TV, you know, like they have it up so they can hear it. Now it might end up to where, you know, you can barely hear it because it's so low, but that's not how it's getting picked. You know, it's getting picked at, you know, full volume. You know, even if it's just on their laptop, it's going to be at a volume that, you know, they can hear it.
All right, let's go to number 4, the fourth habit of successful composers, which is set a work schedule.
Yes. Yeah, so the work schedule can be kind of whatever works for you. I'm not saying, you know, you got to wake up at 7 and then work until 5 and then you walk out and go to happy hour or whatever. It can be like mine's a really weird schedule, but it is a schedule, you know. I'll wake up, you know, I'll have my coffee and I might check some emails or whatever and kind of get a game plan going. And then I'll work for, you know, 2-3 hours and then I'll, you know, go for a walk and eat, come back, work for another hour, and then I'll, you know, lift weights, go for a walk, have dinner, and then I'll work again. So like my day might be like 8 or 9 in the morning to like 11 or 12 at night, you know, but there's a lot of breaks in there. But that's what works for me. Like I like to kind of step away from it and go back. So like I will work, you know, during the night, even though technically I could cram all those hours into, you know, a 9 to 5 type of period. For me, it doesn't really work very well. It works better for me to kind of space it out. But for you, it works better to go 9 to 5 than do that. But I think having a schedule is important because especially no matter what, even if you're not doing music, any kind of self-employed thing where you're working from home, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. If you don't set your schedule and have like, this is my routine, this is what I'm going to stick to, it's really easy to kind of fall onto that. And before you know it, you've spent a month, you know, you've done one track, you know what I mean? Like you've done practically nothing. So I think it's important to have, you know, you can even start like on a weekly basis. Like say, okay, this is Sunday. What am I going to do this week? What are my goals? I've got this due and that due. Is there something else I want to put in there, you know, that's extra or whatever, and kind of carve out a time for your extra stuff.
Is it fair to say that you still work an 8-hour day minimally, even though you break it up with lifting weights and going for walks and chugging bottles of tequila or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say yeah. And then I mean, there's some days whenever you know, I can't do the breaks. You know, there's some days whenever I've got, you know, enough work and the deadline's tight, or there's maybe it's even just one track, but it's a track that's just giving me a lot of trouble and it's due soon, and I'll work solid. You know, I'll work 8 hours solid. I won't take any breaks. But generally, yeah, I would say it's probably an 8-hour day. You know. And that's writing music, that's sending emails, that's doing whatever else that is that I happen to need to do that has something to do with work. So it's not all just writing music. And that's something I don't think you should do 8 hours of writing music. You kind of get burned out and you start making some bad decisions, and you know. So I don't. Music is not like making widgets. You know, it's not like something you can just kind of like push through. Sometimes you can, you know, but not all the time. You know, you do have to be creative, whether you're writing for an artist or a TV show or a commercial. Like, you know, you have to have some sort of creativity going. And if you're just trying to like slam it like you're, you know, making pet rocks or whatever, I don't know that you'll get very good results. And also, you'll just kind of start to hate what you do, you know. So I don't think you should necessarily do 8 hours straight of music. That's kind of crazy to me. But you know, unless you're in the zone, there's times when I do go 8 hours straight. You know, especially if it's something I really want to work on. Like maybe it's like kind of an extra side gig that I just happen to want to work on. I will go hours and hours and hours. There's nothing wrong with that either. But yeah, I think in general, like a schedule is at least like a loose schedule. You know, it doesn't have to, you know. You don't have to get on the dry erase board and, you know, be like, all right, at this exact time I need to do this and that or whatever. Unless again, it's you know, this is all an individual thing. This is like what works for you. You know, some people, you know, they will, you know, lock themselves in the studio for 14 hours, you know, drinking tequila and smoking cigarettes or whatever, and that worked great for them. For me, actually, I can't really work and drink at the same time. You know, like it doesn't really work out for me very well. But some people, they come up with great stuff when they're drunk. So that works for you, I guess. Go for it. You know, like I suck when I'm drunk.
Do you work 5 days, 6 days, or 7 days a week?
It kind of depends on the week. I generally try to take one day to where I'm not really doing any kind of work stuff at all, like whether it's music or working on the house or whatever. You know, I try to take one day where I'm just kind of whatever it is I'm going to do. You know, hang out with friends or play video games or whatever it is that I'm, or sometimes actually just playing guitar. You know, like that's kind of like an extra thing for me. It's a fun thing to do. So yeah, I would say it's generally 6 days a week. You know, I'm usually, Saturday I'll usually take off, and then Sunday I'm kind of back at it, at least lightly. You know, not a heavy full-on workload, but I'm usually doing something work-related on Sunday.
What's your absolute favorite genre to work in? Do you have one?
Oh, my favorite genre to work in is for sure electronic. And it can be any kind of, and the reason why that's my favorite now, I feel like that's kind of the most open one. That's the one where I think you can get the most creative with. Obviously, you have certain rules that kind of make it electronic music. So it's not like just like start beating on a trash can, like right, that's electronic music. But like if I'm working on a dance track and I want to do some live bass, I can do that. That works. I can do some guitar. That works. And I feel like I can do kind of weird arrangements, and it kind of works. So that's my favorite, just because I feel like that's the most open to creativity right now. Like I don't feel like you're in a box with electronic music as much as you are with some of the other genres. I feel like you can be more experimental, and so long as it's kind of catchy and it's mostly synth driven, like you're technically electronic. So yeah, that's probably my favorite. I think like with the way the technology is moving, that's where you just have the most kind of cutting edge action these days.
Can you rattle off like the 5 or 6 genres that you most commonly work in for library music?
For library music, for sure, electronic is one. And I guess you could kind of lump pop into there because we're kind of intertwined these days. And then tension for sure is probably the other one. I'd say probably electronic and tension are the two most requested. Then from there, probably like hip hop is another one. And really each one of these actually, there's kind of like, so those are probably the 3 most requested, but of those 3, there's like little sub-genres that that come off this. But like I would like right now I'm working on actually for a promo over in Europe. It's like a very epic like sports kind of track, but it's hip hop, but it's a very specific kind of I guess niche genre of hip hop. It's kind of its own thing, and it's not like say like Migos or whatever. So like there's probably of each one of those, there's probably like at least 3 different subgenres that I kind of work in. But I would say those are the 3 most. After that, get some kind of like guitar-based stuff, whether it's like rock or maybe like kind of upbeat, inspirational, or emotional kind of tension stuff. Yeah, that's. I guess I can't quite get to 5, but those are the 3 or 4 most, and there's a bunch of sub-genres amongst those.
I guess enough time has elapsed now that you could probably identify the genres that you seem to get the most cuts with or the most placements with. Can you offer up what your most lucrative genre is?
I'm trying to think, because I haven't really been combing through my royalty statements anymore like I used to. Now it's just kind of like they come and I'm like, okay, back to work. But,
they call that jaded. I remember a time in your life where you probably ran around the neighborhood with the statement in your hand going, "Look, everybody, look."
Absolutely. Yeah, like I photocopied the checks and all that stuff, like, yeah, like and frame them and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, now it's just okay, cool.
Like Steve Martin in The Jerk running around. The new phone books are here.
Yeah, basically, exactly like that. Yeah, I would say it's probably still like, I don't know which of these. It's probably, I would say definitely the kind of the dance and the hip hop genres are the ones that but that's also, that's what I do the most of too. So I don't know if I would, like, if people are wondering, like, what is the most lucrative genre? Like, okay, so those two are the most lucrative to me, but those are also the two that I do the most of. So,
yeah,
it's not like a per capita thing. Maybe per capita the tension is, I don't know, but for sure what I see the most of and what have been my biggest money makers would probably be. I've actually made some good money on like funk stuff too, like funk, and there's been a couple rock tracks that have made quite a bit of money in advertising.
So as a follow-up to that, my observation watching our members over the years, and I've seen more and more libraries asking for stuff that's really simple and sparse. And people like Matt Hurd have said, funny enough, I did this really awesome track, but they keep using the alt mix. It's basically like bass, drums, a guitar, and a keyboard. Do you find that more often than not, the stuff that gets placed is the simpler, more sparse and stripped down stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say really with any sort of certainty, but because there's this one little hip hop track that I did that is super simple. It's basically bass, drums, and then a little guitar part that I played. It was just like that kind of a thing, super simple, and it's all over my statements all the time. And there's a few like that, but then there's also ones like the one that I just mentioned that I'm working on. That is pretty epic with, full on, like, tons of like strings and synth act. There's tons of stuff going on in this track. And that, I did that a little while ago now, and that has been used a ton. Like, I made a ton of money off of this track, and it is in no way, shape, or form a simple track. Like, it's pretty heavy duty. So I don't really know, but yeah, I think the thing is there's probably more opportunities for the more simple stuff. Just if you just look at like what's getting used, because most of the stuff you're going to get used is going to be, or most of the places that your music will be used are going to be TV shows, and for the most part, it's usually little kind of sparser stuff for sure. But that doesn't mean that sparser. It's going to be sparser stuff. So, but that doesn't mean that the really big productions don't get used a lot either. Like I said, like I've had big production type stuff that get used a lot and placed in a ton of stuff and made a ton of money. So yeah, I know that's kind of a non-answer, but yeah, I guess both.
Oh, you should run for office then.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. It'd be might be a lot easier of a job, right? Just sit around.
That's right. Eat a lot of fancy lunches.
Fancy lunches.
Yeah.
Something goes right, I take credit. Something goes wrong, I blame somebody else.
That's right. But see, you're perfect. You should absolutely run for office.
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, I was talking about the 80-20 rule, and I know that you're very familiar with that as well. And somebody in the chat room or somebody posted a comment, after the video was on YouTube, and they said, well, if 80% of your income comes from 20% of your music, why don't you just make 100% of your music like the 20%? And I thought, well, I can see the logic in that question. I had my own personal feelings why that probably doesn't work out, but I want to hear what you think about that. Why, if you know that 80% of the income comes from 20% of a certain type of track, which almost all of my friends who have become successful composers would agree with that more or less. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it's pretty darn close. Why don't you just zero in on the 20% that are the money makers and just do only that?
Well, I think the simplest and easy explanation for that is you really don't ever know what that 20% is going to be. You know, so yeah, that'd be great. Like, why didn't you take all your life savings and put it into Apple, 20 years ago? Why didn't
I
you do
did.
that?
I
Yeah,
actually best thing
yeah.
I've ever done.
Yeah, so sometimes you nail it, sometimes you don't. It's kind of like it's in a way it's a hindsight, it's 2020 type of thing. I mean, you really just don't ever know. You can
Right.
you can make some loose predictions, but it's just like with a lot of things, like we're talking about stocks. Like you can be like, well, these are some loose predictions about what's going to happen in the economy and the market, but nobody knows really for sure. So that is really basically why you just don't know. Like it's easy to say that, but like I said, whenever if like what we were just talking about, like if I were to look at my statements, I don't know that I could see a particular pattern
Mm-hmm.
um, that I could focus on, because yeah, like I've got the simple stuff that makes a ton of money, and I got the complicated stuff that makes a ton of money. So I think you just have to uh, do the write the best music you can write, and also diversify as much as you can. You and I think that's really what you got to do, because there's no real prediction, or there's no way to predict. Um, what's going to be used. I mean, sometimes you have like a feeling, like again, the track that I'm kind of doing some edits for now for a promo. That one, whenever I did that one, I was like, this is awesome, and this is going to get the crap used out of it. That I knew. There was a Publix commercial that I worked on, and right after I did it, it was one of the ones where it's through a music house, so you have a lot of people competing for it, so you do your
Right.
track, there's like 10, 20 other composers or whatever. And I remember whenever I finished this track, I was like, because I had the video, so I was able to score to it, and I was like, there's no way anybody's beating me on this. I've got this nailed. And I did. So there are some times when you just know, but
Yeah.
for the most part, you don't really, you say, well, this could, or it could not, you never know. So that, I guess, is the answer to that.
My observation on that is because if you get to the point where you're making real money and you're busy all the time, part of your job, part of being a professional, is placating and satisfying the needs of the different libraries that you're working with. If every time they call you or send you an email saying, hey, I need, like urban tension, you go, no, that hasn't been productive for me. I don't do that anymore. That might be the
Yeah.
last time you ever hear from them.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
sometimes you have to suck it up and give them what they ask for, even though it may not be a big money maker for you. You got to look at the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I get requesting all the time, and I'm not really going to be like, well, this is done well or not well, so I'm not going to do it. Especially if they've got a budget. If they've got like a per track budget, I'm not going to be like, well, no. It's like I'm just going to, you just write. You write.
All right, let's move on. Let me find my page here. This is a big one. This has been something that has plagued taxi members, and I would venture to guess most musicians out there in the world, which is knowing how to make your music sound contemporary. What do you do toward that end? And that would be habit number 5.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, it's maybe a little bit of a different situation because a lot of the like kind of new cool music that I hear anymore is actually from the music supervisors or because like a lot of the music supervisors are very, very like finger on the pulse kind of guy. Like they know a lot about what is going on and what's kind of going to be the new thing or what they're hoping that they're going to discover as the new thing or whatever. But they all they have a pretty good knowledge of what's going way better than I do. Like I would not be able to have a conversation about music with a lot of music supervisors. That's like as far as what's kind of going on that's really cool and current. So for me, I get my stuff from the people that I'm writing music from. To be honest, now I do some kind of listening on my own. Like I'll go through different Spotify playlists. Maybe there's an artist that I find that I like, and I'll see what label they're on, and then I'll go to that label's playlist that they might have made on Spotify and listen that way. But yeah, just yeah, I mean, it's so easy now, really, with Spotify. Just go on Spotify and like look at what the top 40 stuff is. Like, look at the different. They've got playlists for literally every possible subgenre that you could think of, and just go on there and just listen to what's going on, and then compare it to your music. And another thing you can maybe do is, because some people do tend to get stuck in their decade, which is pretty easy to do. Now for me, like there's like I like all kinds of decades, like the ones that I grew up in, the ones that were before me and after me. So I don't feel like I've never really gotten a stuck in a decade type of problem. It's not really happened with me, just because it's just never been that way. But I know some people are, and maybe one thing you could do is listen to the music that you like on your decade, and then listen to some of the new stuff, and then try to see if you can find similarities, like certain chord progressions and melodic ideas. Like there's I've seen all kinds of videos on YouTube where they're playing like the newest hit song or whatever, and they like, I think there's a Justin Bieber song that he was comparing to like an old Toto song from the 80s. I think it was off of Toto 4. But anyways, yeah, I'm not the biggest Toto fan, but anyways, I mean, they're fine. I don't hate them or anything like that. I don't know all their albums or anything. But yeah, do something like that, and then maybe if you can see the connection, with the chord progressions and the melodies of the stuff that maybe you loved growing up, and the stuff that's going on now, and then kind of looking at also what are the differences, like how did they bring this into the here and now. Maybe that can help you kind of break out of the dreaded, this sounds dated thing.
Do you apply kind of the same ethic or the same approach, I guess is a better word, to choosing your sounds, or choosing the type of reverb, or the length of the decay on your reverb, or how much compression you use or don't use? So engineering, is your engineering and production, are your engineering and production affected by you going, oh, listen to what they did on that Demi Lovato song, and it just kind of sticks in your brain, and someday you're working on a track that sounds like it could be a track for Demi Lovato, and you go, I remember that cool loopy, delay thing they used or whatever, or do you not get that cerebral about it?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely, whenever if I'm listening to it, I listen to the whatever kind of engineer tricks that they might be doing, and then maybe I can't necessarily replicate it exactly all the time, but
right.
It's at least kind of in my mind, and I think like, what, like if I'm working on a track, it'd be cool if something kind of like that Demi Lovato song where they did this ping pong delay or whatever it was, So yeah, absolutely, I'm always kind of listening to little tricks like that, and adding in here and there to various things.
How often do you collaborate? I remember listening to some of your stuff. Do you ever sing on anything? Because I wouldn't know if I heard you sing or not, but I've heard some of your stuff that has vocals on it. So I'm guessing that you either hire people as work for hires, or that you collaborate. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I am not a singer, actually, at all. For everybody on my mom's side of the family, they can sing really well, actually, and I just did not get that gene. So I'm not a singer. Like I'll do like backup like oohs and ahs and like harmonies and stuff, just to kind of like add an extra flavor to it, so it sounds like there's, like say we want like something that sounds like a group of people or whatever, or a whole band. Like I'll do something like that. But as far as lead vocals go, no way. So usually with songs, I'll collab. That's actually what I do most of my collaborations on with songs, and like even if I could sing, I would still probably do that, just because I like having somebody else's creative brain to kind of bounce ideas off of and work with. Like what I really like to do is actually like if like there's a vocalist that I like their style, their voice or whatever, I like to see if they have maybe a bunch of like guitar and voice or piano and voice demos, and I'll just like I'll have them send me their demos, and I'll just kind of like listen to them and see what I like, and then I'll produce a song. I'll usually strip out the piano or guitar or whatever, and then I'll produce something around their vocals. And I really like doing that because I find, number one, it's easier for me to it's if I say I start the track and then I have to find a vocalist that fits that track, that's a lot harder for me to do, to find a vocalist that is going to fit the bill for a track. Whereas if the vocalist already has his sound or her sound, and it's going great, and it's kind of like their song, so they've got a really good performance because they started, with their guitar in the bedroom or whatever, and it's theirs from start to finish basically. I've already got a good take. I already know what their voice sounds like, and I've got, because I write so many different genres and have so much equipment and play so many different instruments. I've got more tools to kind of mold the sound around their voice than somebody that say, because your voice is your voice, and if it doesn't fit for the track, it doesn't fit for the track. So that's how I like to collaborate with songs. Is find something that's basically already there, and then also it gives me ideas. Like I'll hear something that they did, like the way their melody is or the way their voice is, and it will inspire me to do something that if I started from scratch without a voice, I probably wouldn't have ever thought to do. And then sometimes the vocalists, they're little producers too, and they've got some cool ideas that I wouldn't have thought of, and I'll use that and then just kind of produce it up. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to collaborating, at least for vocals.
What percentage of your work in the last 5 years, let's not consider the earlier years when you were finding your feet, but once you became established, do you lean more towards stuff with vocals or more instrumental?
Definitely more instrumental. I've done more vocals than I have in the past, in the last few years, but it's still mostly instrumental. And a big part of that is just that a vocal song just takes longer to do. And usually whenever I'm doing a vocal song, I'm treating it as even if I never do release it, as something on Spotify, like I treat it as, all right, I'm writing a song here that I want to hear on the radio, and so I spend extra time on it, and it just takes longer, And I think that's I think overall, that's, especially these days, that's a good approach to have, because when you're doing songs, not always, but a lot of times, you're not necessarily just competing with like guys like me that are writing songs, but you're competing with like actual bands and artists, like actual indie bands and indie artists who are touring, and they have a social media, and like they are 100%. They've got their 12-song album, their 5-song EP, and 100% of them have gone into that, and it is their world and their life. And how are you going to compete with that if you're just in a couple days slinging a track at, you know what I mean? Like, it's just no comparison.
I think that I've noticed in the last 30 to 45 days something that I've not seen before, which is some of the companies that use Taxi as a resource and have used us for years and years, we have a very close and strong relationship with them. Libraries that never ever requested instrumentals. They may have had some just because they stumbled on them from people that did songs for them. But I've noticed that libraries that are thought of as song libraries all of a sudden are starting to ramp up and ask us for quite a few instrumentals. And I was thinking about that over the weekend. I wonder if that portends some change in production styles in the industry, if shows are using less songs and more instrumentals. And then Deb and I we're on like the last 3 episodes of Breaking Bad. We're watching, I think, season 5, episode 12 last night, I think. And I noticed that there were 3 instrumental tracks in that episode, and that was already like 8 years ago. Yeah. But you would think Breaking Bad, they had a big music budget, especially in the last 2 or 3 years of the series run. But yeah, there were times where they had restaurant scenes and there was Mexican music playing, or certainly Latin, probably Mexican, because a lot of the show relates to the Mexican drug cartel. and it was instrumental music, and I just found that to be interesting. Have you noticed any uptick in instrumental requests from libraries, or I guess they know you maybe primarily as an instrumental guy, so the requests are the same.
I mean, I certainly haven't noticed a decrease in requests for instrumentals, but I mean, increase. I mean, I think it's about the same. So yeah, that's an interesting observation. I'm not sure what would be causing it.
I'm not either, but it's definitely a thing. I don't know if it's just an anomaly that's happened over the last month or two, or if this is a trend.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that higher quality fully produced songs are becoming more available from artists that have that are on an indie label or something like that, and so maybe it's harder for them to compete with production music songs. Maybe
maybe.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been about the same. Every now and then I'll get a vocal request, but for the most part, it is. I've noticed more requests for like instrumentals that have maybe like a couple vocal elements, like like a shout or some oohs and ahs or something.
Right.
Like
hey,
that.
hey,
still,
or
that kind of thing. Yeah, but it's still basically instrumental.
I think that something I've heard anecdotally from friends of mine who do a lot of music for TV commercials is the ad agencies and their clients who make the products or provide the services often ask for songs. They want cool indie band songs or indie pop bands. And oftentimes they don't care how great the music is. If there were two entities that both had equally great music, one of them was a band that was out touring and has a bit of a name for itself, and the other one is anonymous and could be a one-man band in a studio, the agencies will gravitate oftentimes to the band that's got, even if it's a fake band, which there are a lot of those out there now, where they take the band picture and they do the band album cover and they make it like it's a band to make themselves more appealing to ad agencies, because ad agencies somehow think that's cooler and want a story involved. But here's the irony of it all, which is so often they take the songs and strip out the vocals and go with an instrumental mix. I would say like 80% of the stuff that I'm hearing in commercials now is they take what sounds like a real indie band and strip out the vocals.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I've noticed that as well. And I've had stuff where I've it's like been a vocal song, but they use the instrumental. They strip out the vocals and they use the instrumental for like the promo or the ad or whatever. But yeah, that I've heard that before, that they gravitate more towards real bands. That's over an unknown.
Right. And
even if they're not very popular band.
Right. Well, there's always that discovery thing. Earlier, you were talking about music supervisors being so well versed in the music that's out there. I'm absolutely certain that music supervisors take tremendous pride in going, oh yeah, I knew that band a year ago. Just like A&R guys, love to, like, I was on it early. There's like you get a badge for identifying some obscure band that nobody else knew about a year ago. It doesn't even matter if they suck. You just knew about it a year ago. It's fine.
No, absolutely. That is 100% true. I took a course when I was in LA. It was actually a music supervision course, and it's pretty big name music supervisor that was teaching it. And one of the first things was talking about like what music supervision is and what it isn't. And one of the first things he went over is like, our job is not to break bands. Like so obviously that is such a kind of a big, like, and he kind of went over, it's like everybody wants to be the that wants to find the next big band or whatever and be able to say that you got them their first placement or whatever. He's like, but that's not our job. So it's obviously such an issue in the industry that he felt like he needed to specifically address that right off the top.
Let's go to number 6, the sixth habit of successful composers, which is learn your gear. And I know that you've been a party to the phrase that it's the ear, not the gear. And Matt Hurt was a pretty good example of his studio was laughable. If you were to look at it, even he was the one that said to me, "Come over and see my studio. You'll laugh."
Yeah.
And look at Matt Vanderbo's studio. I mean, there's practically nothing in it. Yet he does really, really well for himself. So how much emphasis do you put on having the latest plugins and having the latest sample libraries, or is it spending a lot of time really getting to know what you do have? Which school of thought do you subscribe to?
I definitely subscribe more to the latter. Like, this is actually the first time in my career when I have an actual kind of sort of studio. As I'm looking around here, like, this is the first time I've had a dedicated room to a studio, and I have more than just a computer with a keyboard, some speakers, and a guitar and bass. I've got a couple hardware synthesizers over here and a drum machine, and I've got all my guitars hanging up as I'm looking around here. So this is the closest to an actual studio I've had, but for most of that time, yeah, it was pretty basic. I remember it was on the taxi forums actually. People were talking about what their studios were like what they had in, and like how much money they had in, and some of the numbers people were kicking around were like shocking. Like, I'm talking like $25,000. And at this time, I was doing it full time. This is a while ago now, but I was doing it full time, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, geez. I was like, I have a laptop with like Logic and Reason, busted keyboard with like 3 dead keys, and I do this for a living. Like, like that's all I have. And like, you guys have, people are like talking about like ripping their walls out and making it soundproof and all this other kind of craziness. Right. I'm like, holy moly, guys, just get a corner of a room somewhere and you'll be good to go. So yeah, I think you should, there's nothing wrong with I'm getting more sounds and gear now, but that's because I've been doing it for a living for a while, and I can obviously afford it, and it's a tax deduction. So I'm not necessarily against that. What I'm against is I feel like a lot of people, and everybody, including myself, have fallen prey to this at least once or twice, where they think, let's use mastering for an example, just because that's an easy example. Think, okay, I can get, if I just had this new limiter, the new L14000
right.
Ultra Maximizer for $250 or whatever, then my mixes will sound like what was on the radio. But that's really not true, So I think you should, especially these days, you get so many good plugins with your DAWs that it's insane. Learn how to use that stuff. Learn how to use what you have before you start adding stuff. Now with sounds, I'm a little more, I guess a little more quick to grab the new sounds, than say like grabbing some other gear, like a mixing gear, because yeah, I mean, you need good sounds. So you don't want to use really dated orchestral sounds. You want to have good synth sounds, and a lot of them are so cheap now that it's really not that big of a deal to pick those up. It's not like you're going to be getting a second mortgage on your house to get a new loop pack or something. Like, things are so cheap these days. So I think you should definitely make sure you get good sounds, and that can make a world of difference. Like, I remember whenever I was first trying to do orchestral stuff, I was using, I think it was like stock Logic sounds from, it was like Logic Pro 8 or something. Like, this was a while ago. And I was like, this is not really sounding great. And then I sprung for the East West Gold bundle. And like, immediately my orchestral music sounded like way better. Like, it sounded like I was a better writer, and I wasn't. It's just the sounds were better. And part of that is also the sounds. You got a better sound. It's gonna inspire you to write in ways that you're running. So I think it's good to definitely keep your sounds modern, and it's okay. But just don't yeah, just don't get into this like mode of just constantly buying new stuff to solve a problem. Like, if you have good sounds, especially with plugins as far as like compressors and EQs and stuff like that, you really don't need to mess with it. Like, you can use the stock stuff. Learn how to get something sounding good with what you have before you start adding on, because you can spend all the money you want, if you don't know how to use this stuff, it's not going to matter. Like, there's guys that my mixes and masters are sounding pretty good right now, but there are guys that with a fraction of what I have could make a better mix and a master, just because they know, they have more experience and they just know their tools better, and that's, I think, what people should focus on for the most part. But yeah, like, if you got a Casio keyboard, don't think that you're going to be able to make that kick drum on the Casio keyboard sound like a real drum, or sound like the most current hip hop kit. You know what I mean? Like, there is a line there. I'm not trying to say build a plywood guitar and that's gonna work. You know what I mean? Like, although I have heard of a guy that did a really good guitar tech, I guess, and he built a piece of junk out of literally a sheet of plywood, but apparently it plays amazing. So, exceptions to every rule, I guess.
Always exceptions to every rule. I want to answer a couple of the questions that we got. I don't know. Did you have a seventh habit? I looked at the list that you and I talked about yesterday, and I realized it was only 6 habits long.
I've got one for network.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. With networking, let me think, how do I want to say? So networking is important, but I think sometimes people get a little too crazy with it. So I think it's important to go to like a rally and meet people, or if you have a good local music scene, maybe go and meet people out there and kind of network. But just don't go. I sometimes I hate hearing the word network. It's like it gets you so much. It just it's like, because then it's like, are you really even networking, or are you just wasting time? Like, that's what I sometimes like. Don't get so, people have that saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, I don't really agree with that. I think it's a little both. So just find a balance there. Definitely do your networking, but don't be one of these people that you're out at a music convention networking more than you are in the studio, right? But also don't be a person that just sits in your studio and never sends the music out, never goes to any conventions. It is important. Like, there's been a lot of gigs that I've gotten just from networking, and some of them, it's not necessarily like a the next day kind of thing. Like, there's been situations where, like, I've met somebody, and we talked, we hung out, had a good time, and I knew them for like at least 2 years before I think I ever did any work for them. And now I do a ton of work for them. So that, I definitely think, is something that successful people do. You get out there and but don't go overboard. Don't be the chatty Cathy networker. That's all you do.
One of our mutual friends told me years ago, probably like 8 or 9 years ago, at the rally, we were having a burger together, and he said, I see people that come here year after year, and they're clearly building their network, but they don't bring anything to the network. And I said, what do you mean? He said, people want you to be a contributor. He said, it starts on the taxi forum when people who are new to the forum, if they want to become part of the family, part of the network, they should spend some time in peer-to-peer, listening to other people's music and giving comments. That way you develop a reputation as part of the family, part of the group, a team player, and people will start to get to know your musical personality and what you're strong at. If you consistently say the vocals would be better if you did this, and you're right about that, then other people will go, oh, he's got a great ear for vocals. Now you're bringing something to the network, and eventually that may result in you producing a vocal track or singing a vocal track. So if your goal is just, I'm going to get as bunch of business cards and tell everybody how great my music is, it's a turnoff. It's like a sleazy, dorky guy going to a bar, walking up to every woman in the bar going, "Hey, baby, new in town." I mean, it's cheesy. Yeah. It's cheesy.
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't put it better. And yeah, I think also with networking, like I'm not the best networker, by the way. Like I'm not a good salesman. Like, so I'm maybe the last person to take advice as far as networking goes. Like, this is certainly my weakest of the seven traits of successful people, whatever. But I think one thing is that with really everything, just like we were talking about with the schedule, with networking, it's got to be kind of like what fits you and your personality. I think sales are probably like that too. Like here we go, for example, talking to girls in bars. All right, so let's see. My cousin, he kind of takes the Marine approach, right? Just charge, and he just talks to every girl at the bar. And you know what? That works for him. It does work for him. I'm not that guy. Like that, it would never work for me. Like that is not the way. I'm more of the sit back, like, oh, she seems like she might be interested in me. Let me go feel it out or whatever, that kind of a thing. That works for me. His technique works for him. So for me with networking, I've always just approached it as, I want to make friends with people, because there was a quote I read on a book. Sometimes it was like a Kinko's or something like that, right? And I can't remember who wrote it, where it came from. This is when I had my last day job, and the quote was, all things being equal, people would rather work with their friends. All things being slightly unequal, people would still rather work with their friends. And I thought about it, and so my approach isn't like, well, I want to be this person's friend so that they want to work with me. It's more like, I don't want to work with somebody that I can't be friends with, kind of thing, in a way. Like, especially like at that time, whenever I was like, I want to do music because that's what I want to do. Like, why would I want to put myself in a situation, even if I was doing music, where it's something I'm not going to want to do? So I always kind of approach it as, let me kind of make friends with people and see if I want to hang out with them. And if we work together, then that's great. If not, then hey, I've got a new friend. And that was my approach. Maybe that'll work for you, maybe not. But I think, tailor it to, don't try to be somebody that you're not when you're networking. Like, if you're not if you're not the Marine, like my cousin, where you're just charged, then don't do that. But if you are and that worked, then do it. I don't think there's one right way to do it. You just kind of have to know who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just kind of go with that and let it be kind of natural and organic. And also like offer some, see what can you offer, like on just a more business side of it. Like, what do you have to offer to them? A lot of times people, when they network, they're trying to figure out what this person can do for them. Like,
right.
Like, what can this person do for me? Like, what can you do for them? If you do something for them, like, you'll get the gig. But if it's all like kind of a one-way street there, like you're just trying to get something from them, then I don't think your networking is going to be very successful.
I had a great technique for meeting young ladies when I was in college. A guy that I knew who was probably in his 40s had a husky puppy, and he was leaving town for a week and asked me if I would babysit his husky puppy, which was about 4 months old. So one day I had to go to a class, and I drove over to campus and I took the dog with me. I never made it to the class because everywhere I went, walking, like on the pathway or the sidewalk to the class, I was getting bombarded with girls coming up going, "Can I meet your dog?" So for the whole rest of the week, I would just go park my car, get out of the car, find a tree, lean up against the tree and throw a ball. And I've never met so many girls in my life. I didn't have to say a word. It's actually better that I didn't say a word. So my advice is puppies. Bring a puppy to the road rally. Meet collaborators.
There you go. That actually probably would work.
All right. So here's a question from Dan Weber. What's the number one motivating factor in sync licensing that keeps you inspired to work as hard as you do?
That's a good question. I don't know if there is one specific factor. It's kind of look. I mean, I like what I do. So there are times when I get something in and it's like I've done it a million times, and it's like, maybe that's hard to get inspired, but it's just like that's kind of comes with the territory. However, there's a lot of other things that come in where it's like, oh, this is different, and it's kind of like a puzzle. So I guess maybe with some of it anyways, it's kind of like the puzzle aspect, like kind of trying to figure out like how am I going to do this? How am I going to make this work? That's probably the number one, and then also I guess maybe this is another number one too. It really kind of depends on the genre, to be honest. Like if it's like, so I really like writing, kind of more popular music genres, and so whenever I get a request in and it's something in there, whether it's a rock song or a dance track or whatever, like I just like, man, I want to make something catchy, and so just that kind of like aha moment whenever you come up with a good progression or something catchy or something just works, that really is motivating to me, just to kind of get to that point. But if it's something like where it's like, say, a tension cue, where it's really like it's for the scene, it's kind of more the puzzle aspect, trying to figure out, all right, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to convey this emotion that they're trying to get me to convey with this. Sometimes I have the picture, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just have a reference track. So yeah, I would say that. So it depends on the genre. Either just coming up with something catchy, like that's my favorite thing in the world, is whenever I come up with a good song, like a good riff, good whatever. So that's motivating in and of itself. And then if it's something that's not like a catchy music genre, like a tension or a dramedy type of thing, or whatever, it's catchy is not really the thing that they're going for, then it's more of just like the puzzle aspect of kind of figuring out how to make it work.
Andre Stepanian asked a question that I think you pretty much answered already, but I just want Andre to know that I've got your question here. With an old Roland from the 80s, how'd you manage to get forwards and possibly deals with dated sounds, or you didn't until you upgraded your gear? And he already answered and said, yeah, he just learned how to use what he had well.
Well, also, I was using it as a MIDI controller. So I had sounds at that time. It was Reason. So I had modern sounds, but I was using that as of course, even though now those sounds are kind of back in style, all those 80s
right.
synths. So now, like, actually, yeah, like that one's got some really great string and brass sounds that work really well with today's pop music. So yeah, that's really, back then that's what it was. I was using it as a controller.
I loved Oberheim and Prophet 5, and then along came the Yamaha DX7, which was the most advanced synth out there, but just I never heard a sound come out of a DX7. I mean, that I went, wow, that sounds beautiful. You know what I mean? It just didn't have any richness to it, but it was a bag of tools, let's say. All right, here's a great question from Stephen Bruce. Chuck Henry says, you understand the algorithm that ASCAP uses in processing payment to composers. Could you please explain the algorithm as well as what you know about the differences between ASCAP and BMI? This might be my favorite question. I had no idea. I know you fairly well. I had no idea that you've sussed out the algorithm. Is there truth in that statement?
Wait. You might have to repeat that because it's kind of garbled. So something about algorithms with ASCAP and BMI?
Right. Do you understand? Chuck Henry says that you understand.
Chuck Henry says it.
Yeah, and this is from Stephen Bruce, who apparently knows Chuck Henry well enough that he was able to pry this out of him. Chuck Henry says you understand ASCAP's algorithm that they use to pay people. Can you explain the algorithm?
The ASCAP algorithm?
Yeah, or was that a joke?
How they figure out how to... That has to be a joke, because I don't even know if ASCAP understands ASCAP's algorithm, to be honest.
I think that's a true statement. For any of the PROs, it's like you would be better off trying to learn, like, chaos theory or something, or learn how to be a brain surgeon than you could ever figure out the algorithm. You're right. Yeah. Nobody knows it.
Yeah, they both of them... I feel like right now BMI might be a little bit more transparent with things than ASCAP, especially after this whole COVID thing, with the way they're doing their accountings and whatnot. But Yeah, both of them have a little bit of a kind of like Wizard of Oz, pay no attention, the man behind the curtain kind of thing. Like, you don't like what is really going on here? Like, well, how do you figure this out? How do you track any of this stuff? Nobody really seems to know. I can make some guesses. It seems like, obviously initial airings pay more than the reruns. If you have more plays in a quarter, obviously it's going to pay more. Certain networks pay more. Like, I don't think there's really any way to be able to figure it out, because some of it comes down to, I think, the deals that they strike with the individual networks, and what those are, which I don't know how public those numbers are. And then from there, it's just like, yeah, then they got to figure out like what kind of advertising dollars are being brought in for this show at this time, and I have no idea. It's yeah, way beyond. That's above my pay grade. Way above my pay grade.
I would love to know if there even is an algorithm. I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. Is there an algorithm? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I have a strange feeling that if we dive too deep into this, that we both may be looking over our shoulders for years to come. Some things are best left unexplained.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I might have already said too much. Who knows?
Oh, man. All right, let's take one more question from the chat room. God, we've only got 9 minutes left. Maybe we can get 2 in. All right, I'm scanning. Does anybody have a question? Please type the word question in all caps. What genres did you grow up listening to, and how easy is it to learn an unfamiliar genre?
Oh, that's a good question. So I grew up listening to rock when I was really young. I listened to all the 80s rock stuff. Van Halen was my favorite band, still my favorite band, actually. And then, in the 90s, I listened to all the, the grunge and alternative stuff. Love Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, of course, Rage Against the Machine. I was very much a rock guy, 100% rock guy. As far as learning other genres, I think the longer you do this, and the more genres you kind of tackle, the easier it becomes. So you just start to kind of notice patterns, and there's just certain things you just kind of pick up on quickly. It's more difficult at first. But really, I mean, you kind of have to start listening to it, and I would say break it down like as much as possible. Like if, say, you wanted to learn how an engine works, I guess you can just go online and do that. But let's say you really wanted to get hands-on with it. You go in there and you take it apart and look at all the different parts, see how what happens here and there. I think it's the same thing with a song. Like you start with something as simple as like the kick drum. Like, what does the kick drum sound like in this genre? Like, what makes it sound like that? How can I make my kick drum sound like that? And you move on to the snare and the hi-hat. If there's guitars, listen to that. If there's synths, listen to the synths. Like, what is it that this synthesizer is doing? What's the sound? Like, is it kind of dancing around, or is it more like an impact type of sounding thing? And just really break it down, like each like track by track by track, and just keep at it, and you'll get better and better. And the longer you do it, the quicker it'll come. Like, at a certain point, like when you say learning your first new genre, that who knows, that might take months or maybe even a year to really get it to sound good. But then the next genre, it won't take that long. And then after you've been doing it for 10 years, you'll be able to listen to a genre you haven't heard before and just instantly be able to figure it out, because you'll know your way around synthesizers and amp plugins and your compressors and your EQs, and you'll know where you should be looking to find a kick sound like that, and how to make it cut through the mix the way it does in this particular genre or whatever. I would say at first it's kind of difficult, but after a while it becomes easy.
Okay, Greg Carroza wants to know, how many tracks do you do in a year?
Uh, I don't really keep track, but I would say I stick to probably the 100 to 150 range, maybe as many as 200. Like the most I think I've ever done in a year is around 300, and that kind of feels like too much. Like I kind of got a little burnout that year when I was pushing the 300 range. So yeah, I like to stick to like 10 a month type of things, like 120, 150, something like that.
Matthew Vander Bogey has a question. How do you get that hairstyle?
Well,
just for anybody who's watching who's not part of the club, Vanderbo's a close friend of his.
Yeah, just patience, man, patience. Grow it out. Yeah. Eat lots of oatmeal.
What's your favorite drum plugin?
Favorite drum plugin?
Yeah.
For like acoustic drums, like real sounding drums.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. What's your favorite drum?
Okay, so I have two. All right, so if I'm doing like modern rock or like say modern country, something like that, Stephen Slate is generally my go-to. That one to me has the most kind of like crisp and modern sounding drums. I feel like, and some people disagree with me on this, but I feel like Stephen Slate's a little bit of a one-trick pony. Like the one thing it does the best. But if say I wanted to do a like vintage funk track, I wouldn't sound like it came out in the 1970s or 1960s. I haven't really heard anything out of Stephen Slate that really does that well, like at least out of the box. I mean, maybe there's some production tricks you can do, but for that kind of stuff, or like say indie rock, I'm more of a fan of Addictive Drums. I think that they have a more diverse palette of drum sounds. So yeah, if I'm doing like an indie track or something retro, it will always be Addictive Drums that I pull up. But if I'm doing something like if somebody wants like a hard rock track or a modern country track, then I'll pull up Stephen Slate. Like it's just got that CLA kind of drum sound, like that is really polished, slickly produced drum sound.
I had really no idea. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because Deb and I have been doing some spring cleaning and we just got tons of bookshelves everywhere in the house loaded with books. And while I was cleaning out one of the bookshelves, I saw a box of Stephen Slate drums that he'd given me probably like 7 or 8 years ago. So I'm going to have to install that in Logic now and then maybe do an update. And yeah, good to know. Yeah. I had no idea.
They still sound good. Yeah. Stephen Slate, great drum sound.
He's a drummer, so makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and talk about a hairstyle. I've never seen his hair. Yeah, tons of hair gel.
Yes, he does. All right. Well, we got like 2 minutes left. I'm trying to scan if I can see a really quick one to answer.
And also, by the way, I also want to say that with the Stephen Slate stuff, my info on that might be outdated. Maybe there's been an update to the Stephen Slate drums where they have more sounds, where like they have better retro sounding stuff. I haven't updated in a while, so this could be old info.
Right.
I don't know. So check it out. But for sure, the modern rock stuff, I don't think has changed anything. It's still excellent.
Where's the best place? Several people have asked, where can they go listen to your music? Where's your like most updated playlist?
I don't know. I don't update any of mine. I don't put it.
The reason I asked it that way is I was looking yesterday afternoon and I went, I don't think he's put anything new on here in about 4 years.
More like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was being kind.
Yeah. It's been, like when I had the website made, which is around 10 years ago now, I had some music. And actually a lot of that music wasn't even supposed to be up there for that long. It was like, some of it's just like, I just had it there just because I wanted a genre that I was going to fill out later. So I was like, all right, here's a couple tracks, put that up there and I'll give you some stuff. And I just never did it. So yeah, I don't, because I've actually thought about taking my website down because there's not really any point for me to have it, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know, actually. I don't really post music up anywhere. Like I kind of write it and I send it off, and then that's kind of that.
So what you're saying there, Steve, is you write, submit, forget, and repeat.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Exactly what I do. Like instantaneously forget about it. Gone.
Well, I've got to say, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I appreciated the fact that we got to hang out for an hour yesterday.
Definitely. That was fun.
It was. And just once again, man, I'm so proud of you from that. I will never, as long as I live, forget that moment where I saw you standing up in front of that giant light with the video camera on. And I literally could tell everything I needed to know about you as a person inside of a minute or two. And here we are 12, 15 years later, and you are exactly that guy that I thought. So you are what you are. There's no pretense in you whatsoever. And I will always be grateful that you sent me that letter and acknowledged that Taxi was your launching pad. And I think that everybody who watches this show today will be inspired by you, and now you're paying it back as you're their launching pad. So thank you for joining us, and continued good luck. And when Deb and I make it to Florida sometime late spring or early summer, if we're anywhere near you, I will give you a call, and let's go out and grab dinner together, all right?
Yeah, hit me up. I'll be here.
All right. Great to see. Well, yes and no. That's a whole other time.
Yes and no, yeah. Yes and no. Spring, probably, yeah. Probably still be here.
All right, man. Yeah. Great to see you. Thank you for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stephen Baird.